The clinking of cutlery against china is too loud in the strained silence of the dining room. It's another Friday, another family dinner, another ambush. Mom sits at the head of the table, her smile tight. My younger sister, Clara, preens beside her, all fluttering eyelashes and feigned innocence. Across from me sits Mr. Albright, his eyes lingering a little too long, his reputation as a con artist preceding him in the circles I now move in. Alara, dear, Mom says, her voice like honey laced with arsenic. Mr. Albright was just saying how charming he finds your resilience. I try to object, to point out this is the third suitable man this month, but the word catches in my throat. Oh, don't be difficult, Alara, she snaps, the mask slipping. You're practically unmarriageable as it is. The words, sharp and familiar, echo the exact venom of my past life. A shiver runs down my spine, a ghostly reminder of the ruin that followed. But this time, my fingers find the cool metal of the royal crest ring hidden deep in my pocket. This time, things will be different. Mom. Her name is Beatrice, but Mom is the title she wields like a weapon. A widow, yes, but one who shed her mourning blacks faster than a snake sheds its skin. Her grief was fleeting, replaced by a relentless, clawing ambition to elevate our family's name, or rather her name, through Clara. I was always the obstacle, the reminder of a less glamorous past, the daughter who didn't quite fit her meticulously crafted social narrative. She needed Clara to shine, and my light, however dim she tried to keep it, was always a perceived threat. Alara, darling, be a dear and fetch Mr. Henderson another drink, won't you? Mom's voice, saccharine and sharp, cut through the murmur of the garden party she was hosting. Mr. Henderson was her latest attempt to marry Clara off to old money. I was 17. Clara, a year younger, was already adept at the art of the doe-eyed gaze and the carefully timed giggle. I remember thinking, even then, how much energy Mom poured into Clara. Clara's dresses, Clara's tutors, Clara's debutante ball. My own achievements, small scholarships won and quiet talents nurtured, were met with polite, dismissive nods. That's nice, dear, she'd say, her attention already drifting back to Clara's latest social conquest. It wasn't just about resources, it was about focus, about love. Clara was an investment. I was an afterthought, a potential liability. And Clara, my sweet angelic sister, the one who could cry on cue and twist words with the skill of a seasoned politician. It started small, as these things often do. A borrowed blouse never returned, a childhood trinket lost, only to reappear in her possession. Then it escalated. The inheritance money from Grandma Willow, meant for both of us, somehow found its way entirely into funding Clara's artistic endeavors. A series of failed boutiques and vanity projects. Mom, of course, signed off on it. Clara has such a creative spirit, Alara. You understand, you're the practical one. Practical meant getting a scholarship, working part-time jobs, and watching my sister squander what should have been our shared safety net. Boyfriends were another battlefield. Any boy who showed even a flicker of interest in me would soon find himself captivated by Clara's performance of fragile charm. She'd confide in them, eyes glistening with unshed tears about how difficult I was, how burdened she felt. They'd lap it up, eager to be her knight in shining armor, leaving me standing in the wreckage of another stolen connection. It wasn't just about having them, it was about taking them from me. Then there's Victoria, our family best friend. Or rather, Mom's best friend, a woman whose loyalty was as shallow as her smile. Victoria, with her perfectly coiffed hair and her insatiable appetite for gossip. She was the conduit, the amplifier of our family's carefully curated image, and, more deliciously for her, its whispered scandals. Every misstep of mine, every perceived slight, every carefully constructed rumor Mom or Clara wanted to circulate found its way to Victoria. And from Victoria, it flowed like a toxic river onto the social media feeds and into the eager ears of their circle. Did you hear about Alara? Victoria's voice would drop to a conspiratorial whisper over bridge games and charity luncheons. Such a shame, that girl, so headstrong. Not like her lovely sister. In my past life, these undercurrents, these insidious betrayals, were like a slow-acting poison. I felt their effects, the isolation, the chipped-away confidence, the public humiliations. but I never truly saw the hands administering them. Not clearly, not until it was too late. The worst of it, the wound that festered and ultimately led to my despair, was James, my fiancé. Or rather, the man who was my fiancé. He was everything I thought I wanted: charming, ambitious, seemingly kind. He was also Clara's current target, a fact I was painfully blind to in my first life. I remember the day it all shattered. It was our engagement party. I was glowing, naively believing in our future. Then I saw them, Clara and James, tucked away in the shadows of the garden, their silhouettes merged in a passionate embrace. The world tilted, the laughter and music fading into a dull roar. Clara, when confronted with mascara streaking her face, wailed about how James had pursued her, how she'd tried to resist, how she didn't want to hurt me. James, ever the opportunist, looked vaguely uncomfortable but didn't deny it. Mom, of course, sided with Clara. These things happen, Alara. Perhaps it's for the best. James needs someone softer, more adaptable. The public fallout was brutal. I was jilted, humiliated. My difficult nature, a narrative so carefully cultivated by my family and amplified by Victoria, was cited as the reason. My business, already struggling, collapsed under the weight of the scandal and withdrawn investments, some of which I later learned were influenced by whispers from my own mother about my instability. The shame was a suffocating blanket. That life ended in a haze of sleeping pills and a quiet, desperate wish for it all to stop. Now, reborn, I walk through these same rooms, listen to these same voices, but the fog has lifted. Their masks are transparent. When Mom praises Clara's innate business sense, after Clara presents a barely disguised version of my own marketing proposal, I see the gleam of calculation in her eyes. When Clara accidentally spills wine on my dress before an important meeting, her apology dripping with false sympathy, I see the smirk she can't quite hide. When Victoria asks overly probing questions about my new ventures, her eyes shining with a journalist's hunger, I know exactly where those answers will end up. The patterns are stark, repeating themselves with an almost farcical precision. Clara is once again making subtle plays for any man who shows me a moment's kindness, her tactics refined but instantly recognizable. Mom is still funneling resources and opportunities Clara's way, using her dwindling social capital to pave her favorite's path. Victoria is still listening at keyholes, figuratively and sometimes literally. But this time, I'm not the naive, emotionally fragile girl they remember. The pain of the past has forged a core of steel within me. I observe, I note, I file away each slight, each manipulation. My heart doesn't ache with the fresh wounds of betrayal. It beats with a calm, steady rhythm of purpose. They think I'm the same Alara, the one they could break. They have no idea. My silence is no longer weakness. It's a shield, and behind it, I'm building my arsenal. The royal crest ring in my pocket is just the beginning. They are playing their old, tired game, and I, with the clarity of a second chance, am finally ready to change the rules. The email from Innovate Now investors glowed on my screen. Dear Miss Vance, we were incredibly impressed with the Aura Bloom lifestyle app proposal presented by your sister, Clara Vance. Her vision is truly groundbreaking. My sister, her vision. I took a slow, deliberate breath. Aura Bloom was mine. Weeks of late nights, market research, coding prototypes, all distilled into a comprehensive business plan I'd foolishly left on my home office desk. Clara, with her talent for appropriation, had clearly found it. The old Alara would have raged, confronted, probably burst into tears, providing them with perfect ammunition for another round of Alara's emotional instability. The new Alara smiled, a small, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. The public announcement of Innovate Now's interest in Clara's project was a grand affair, orchestrated by Mom, of course. A champagne reception at a trendy art gallery. Clara was radiant in a borrowed designer dress, basking in the flash of cameras and the fawning congratulations. Mom stood beside her, beaming with proprietary pride. Victoria was already live tweeting #girlbossclara #futuresfemale. I made my entrance quiet, understated, when Clara, with a magnanimous gesture, pulled me into a hug for the cameras, whispering, "Isn't this wonderful, Alara? My big break." I hugged her back. "I'm so proud of you, Clara," I said, my voice clear and steady, loud enough for the nearest cluster of reporters to hear. "You always were the ambitious one." Some might have caught the subtle barb, but Clara, lost in her triumph, merely squeezed tighter. I appeared to be the supportive older sister, graciously accepting her siblings' assent. Defeated, perhaps, but dignified. Behind the scenes, however, a different narrative was unfolding. 2 days before the reception, I'd requested a private meeting with Mr. Harrison, the lead investor at Innovate Now. I hadn't mentioned Clara or the stolen proposal. Instead, I presented Elysian Fields, an advanced iteration of Aura Bloom. It had all the core features Clara had presented, but with enhanced AI, a sleeker interface, and a far more robust monetization strategy. And crucially, I had the working prototype, time-stamped code, and a trail of developmental emails that predated Clara's vision by months. Mr. Harrison was a shrewd businessman, not easily fooled and certainly not appreciative of being misled. He listened intently, his expression growing increasingly grim as I laid out the evidence, not of theft, but of my own superior pre-existing work. I never accused Clara. I simply presented my project as a more advanced, more viable alternative they might also wish to consider. I framed it as a happy coincidence, a chance for them to back an even stronger horse. The launch party for Aura Bloom was meant to be Clara's coronation. Innovate Now had booked a chic downtown venue. Speeches were planned. Contracts were, presumably, ready to be signed. Clara was on cloud nine, practicing her acceptance speech. Mom was already planning how to leverage this success for further social climbing. Mr. Harrison took the stage. Clara beamed, clutching Mom's hand. The room fell silent. Innovate Now is committed to fostering true innovation, he began, his voice resonant. We seek out not just ideas, but the dedication and proven ability to execute them. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room before landing pointedly on me. That is why, after careful consideration and the review of a truly exceptional, fully realized platform, we are thrilled to announce our partnership not with Aura Bloom, but with Miss Alara Vance and her groundbreaking project Elysian Fields. The silence that followed was a beautiful, terrible thing. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Clara's face went from radiant to ashen in a heartbeat. Mom looked like she'd been slapped. Victoria's phone clattered to the floor. My sister's meticulously constructed dream imploded before her very eyes, live and in high definition for all their social circle to witness. Later, amidst the hurried apologies and the frantic damage control from Mom, Clara found me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Her voice choked. "Alara, how could you? It was it was a misunderstanding." I smiled, a genuine, gentle smile this time. "Clara, don't worry about it. These things happen in business." I patted her arm. "I'm just happy the best project succeeded. That's all that matters, isn't it?" She stared at me, searching for the anger, the triumph, the recrimination she expected, the reaction that would allow her to play the victim. She found nothing but serene acceptance. The old Alara would have reveled in this, perhaps even twisted the knife. The new Alara understood that the sweetest revenge was watching them unravel by their own actions, while I simply moved forward, untouched. The humiliation of her public downfall, orchestrated so subtly, was far more potent than any screaming match could ever be. Mom was already hissing about salvaging their reputation, but the cracks in their facade were showing. And I was just getting started. The announcement, when it came, was delivered with Mom's signature blend of feigned maternal warmth and steely determination. We were at another stilted family brunch, the kind where the tension was thick enough to spread on toast. "Clara, darling, James and I have had the most wonderful discussion," Mom declared, beaming at my sister, then at James, who sat beside Clara looking smug. James, my ex-fiancé, the architect of my public humiliation in my past life. "We've decided that the remaining family funds will be allocated to give you to the wedding you deserve." Remaining family funds. The same funds that should have been split, the funds I'd mentally earmarked for my own ventures before realizing they were already earmarked for Clara's happiness again. My stomach clenched, not with surprise, but with a weary sense of inevitability. In my past life, their wedding had been the final nail in my coffin, a lavish spectacle paid for with what was partly mine, solidifying their triumph and my ruin. This time, I didn't flinch. I didn't protest. I simply offered a serene smile. "That's wonderful news, Mom Clara, James." I turned to Clara, my expression one of earnest helpfulness. "Wedding planning can be so stressful. Please, let me help. I insist." Clara looked momentarily suspicious, searching my face for any hint of sarcasm or resentment. Mom, however, seized on the offer. "Oh, Ilara, that's so thoughtful of you. You always were the organized one." It was a way to keep me involved, controlled, and perhaps in their minds to rub my face in their happiness. They probably imagined me fetching, carrying, and quietly seething in the background. "I'd be happy to handle the venue," I volunteered, my voice smooth as silk. "I have a few connections that might be able to secure something truly special. My treat, of course, a wedding gift." Mom and Clara exchanged a quick, avaricious glance. The idea of a special venue, likely more opulent than they could afford even with the family funds, and for free, was too tempting to resist. "Well, if you're sure, dear," Mom demurred, already picturing the envious faces of her social rivals. My connections, of course, were not the local country clubs or repurposed barns they might have envisioned. My connection was singular, discreet, and immensely powerful, the royal household. My secret meetings with the Queen's private secretary, born from an act of quiet bravery in this new life, had yielded more than just business mentorship. They had yielded access. I arranged for the pre-wedding reception, a lavish cocktail event intended to impress James's business associates and showcase the family's supposed affluence, to be held in the exclusive, rarely accessible celestial gardens of the royal palace, an honor usually reserved for visiting dignitaries and the highest echelons of the aristocracy. The invitations, subtly embossed with a hint of the royal insignia, went out. The guest list, which I helped curate, was a carefully selected mix of their usual crowd and a significant number of influential figures, titled nobles, respected financiers, and key members of the press who specialized in high society and financial reporting. People James desperately wanted to impress, and people Mom and Clara yearned to be accepted by. The evening of the reception was a masterpiece of understated elegance. String quartets played softly, champagne flowed, and the scent of night-blooming jasmine filled the air. Mom and Clara were practically levitating with social triumph. James swaggered, shaking hands, his voice a little too loud, his boasts about upcoming deals a little too grandiose. He felt untouchable, validated by the sheer opulence of his surroundings and the caliber of the guests. And that was precisely when the carefully laid trap snapped shut. I had done my research on James in this new life, armed with the painful knowledge of his past betrayals. His business dealings, which he so proudly flaunted, were built on a house of cards, shady investments, inflated projections, and a string of disgruntled former partners. Information that, in my previous life, had come out too late to save me, but which I now possessed ahead of time. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I had simply ensured that certain documents, detailing James's more questionable ventures, found their way into the hands of a few strategically chosen financial journalists and influential investors present. Anonymous tips, untraceable but impeccably timed. As James was holding court, regaling a circle of potential backers with tales of his imminent success, discreet murmurs began to circulate. Smartphones lit up with hushed alerts. Seasoned investors exchanged knowing, troubled glances. The atmosphere began to shift, subtly at first, then with gathering speed, from celebratory to deeply uncomfortable. One particularly respected baron, known for his financial acumen and zero tolerance for fraud, was overheard questioning James rather pointedly about a specific shell corporation. James, caught off guard, stammered, his usual glibness deserting him. The journalists, smelling blood, began to close in, their questions polite but razor-sharp. The facade of James's success started to crack, then crumble, under the weight of informed scrutiny in the most prestigious and public setting imaginable. Mom, initially oblivious, finally sensed the changing tide. Her smile froze, her eyes darting nervously as she saw the clusters of intense, quiet conversations and the way prominent guests were suddenly making their excuses to leave. Clara, utterly bewildered, just looked pale and lost. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for James. By the next morning, his precarious financial empire was imploding. Deals collapsed. Investigations were hinted at. His name, which he had so desperately wanted to elevate, was now synonymous with scandal. Mom cornered me the next day, her face a mask of panic. "Elara, you have to do something. This is a disaster. Our reputation. James. The wedding." Her voice was shrill, desperate. "You booked the venue. You invited these people. You have to fix this." I looked at her, my expression calm, almost sympathetic. "Mom, this is a terrible situation for James. And for Clara, of course." I paused, letting the silence hang. "Perhaps postponing the wedding might be for the best, for everyone's benefit, until things are clearer." I offered no solutions, no condemnations. Just a simple, practical suggestion, delivered with an air of concerned detachment. The wedding, of course, was indefinitely postponed, then quietly canceled. James disappeared from our lives, his reputation in tatters. Mom and Clara were left to deal with the social shrapnel, their dreams of a grand alliance and elevated status buried under a mountain of scandalous headlines. And I, the quiet orchestrator, had simply offered to help plan a party. The envelope was thick, creamy cardstock, bearing no return address, only an embossed royal crest that shimmered faintly in the morning light. It lay on the polished mahogany of the breakfast table, stark against the mundane backdrop of toast and newspapers. Mom picked it up, her brow furrowed. "What's this, then? Someone trying to be clever?" She slid it open with a butter knife, her usual air of disdain firmly in place. Clara leaned over her shoulder, curious. "Is it an invitation to something, Mom? Maybe the Duchess's charity tea?" As Mom read, her expression shifted. Disdain melted into confusion, then into wide-eyed disbelief. She read it again, her lips moving silently. Clara, impatient, snatched it from her. Her gasp was audible. She looked from the card to me, then back to the card, her face a comical picture of shock. This can't be right," Mom finally stammered, her voice barely a whisper. She looked at me, truly looked at me, for perhaps the first time in years, as if seeing a stranger. "It's addressed to Lady Elara Vance." The title hung in the air, heavy and unbelievable. Lady Elara, a memory surfaced, unbidden, from the early days of my rebirth, a time when I was still reeling from the shock of a second chance, still finding my footing in this strangely familiar yet altered world. It was a rainy afternoon. I was rushing, late for a meaningless temp job I'd taken to keep afloat, the kind of soul-crushing work I'd vowed to escape. A sleek black car, moving too fast, skidded on the wet pavement. An elderly woman caught crossing the street, froze in its path. Without thinking, driven by an instinct I didn't know I possessed, I'd lunged, shoving her roughly towards the curb, taking the brunt of a glancing blow from the car myself. Pain, sharp and searing, had shot up my arm, but the old woman was safe, shaken but unharmed. She was no ordinary elderly woman. She was Her Royal Highness, Princess Annalise, the Queen's beloved aunt, known for her incognito strolls and her fierce independence. The incident was hushed up, of course. The palace was adept at managing such things, but Princess Annalise had a long memory and a deep sense of gratitude. What followed were discreet meetings, initially just to check on my recovery. But the princess, sharp and insightful despite her age, saw something in me, a resilience, an intelligence that my own family had always overlooked or actively suppressed. She became a silent patron, a mentor. She saw the potential in my fledgling business ideas, the ones Clara would later try to steal. With her quiet backing, doors that had been firmly shut began to creak open. She provided not just connections, but wisdom, guidance, and the kind of unwavering belief that I had never experienced. It wasn't just about money, it was about validation, about being seen. The title lady was a recent development, a personal gift from the Queen herself, bestowed in recognition of services rendered discreet consultations on leveraging new technologies for royal charitable foundations, successful implementation of new international trade initiatives I had spearheaded under Princess Annalise's tutelage. It was an honorary title, but it came with significant diplomatic status and an undeniable weight in the circles my mother and sister so desperately tried to navigate. Now, back in the breakfast room, the silence stretched. Mom finally found her voice, though it was thin and reedy. "Lady, what is the meaning of this, Alara? Is this some kind of joke?" Clara was still staring at the invitation. "It's for the Royal Ascension Gala, the most exclusive event of the year, and it says, Lady Alara Vance and guest." Her eyes flicked to me, wide with a dawning, horrified understanding. I took a calm sip of my tea. "It's not a joke, Mother." I kept my tone even, matter of fact. "I've been busy." The truth, unspoken but now glaringly obvious, began to settle upon them. My quiet meetings, my unexplained absences, the subtle but undeniable shift in my fortunes that they had attributed to luck or some minor insignificant success. It all clicked into place with devastating clarity. The Elysian Fields project hadn't just succeeded because it was better. It had the implicit backing of circles they couldn't even dream of accessing. The collapse of James's reputation hadn't just been bad luck. It had occurred in a venue only someone with extraordinary connections could secure, before an audience only someone of significant standing could convene. My newly revealed status as a lady, a royal business envoy with diplomatic privileges, didn't just place me on their social ladder, it placed me several ladders above them, in a completely different stratosphere. All their scheming, their petty cruelties, their attempts to control and diminish me, they had been swatting at a fly while I was transforming into an eagle. Mom sank into her chair, the invitation slipping from her fingers. The meticulously constructed world she had built with its carefully calibrated social hierarchies had just been upended. The daughter she had dismissed as unmarriageable, as a burden, was now, by royal decree, a figure of consequence, outranking every connection they possessed, every socialite they'd ever fawned over. The power dynamic in our small, toxic family hadn't just shifted, it had been obliterated. And the look on their faces, a potent cocktail of shock, envy, and a dawning, sickening realization of their own monumental misjudgment, was a victory far more profound than any shouted accusation or tearful confrontation could ever have been. The royal invitation hadn't just ended Mom's sentence, it had rewritten our entire story. The royal business district was a world away from the chintzy parlors and whispered gossip of my family's circle. Here, glass and steel scraped the sky, ambition hummed in the air like electricity, and power was a currency traded in hushed tones in boardrooms overlooking the city. My office, granted to me as royal business envoy, was on the penthouse floor of the most prestigious tower, offering panoramic views that stretched to the distant, hazy outline of the palace itself. Minimalist, elegant, and undeniably impressive, it was a physical manifestation of how far I had come. The intercom buzzed. "Lady Alara," my assistant's calm voice announced, "your mother, Mrs. Beatrice Vance, and your sister, Miss Clara Vance, are here to see you. They don't have an appointment." I felt a flicker of something. Not surprise, not anymore. Perhaps a detached curiosity. "Send them in, Amelia." They entered tentatively, dwarfed by the scale of the room, their usual assertive demeanors visibly deflated. Mom clutched her handbag like a lifeline, her eyes darting around, taking in the expensive artwork, the bespoke furniture, the quiet hum of efficiency from the outer offices. Clara trailed behind her, looking pale and smaller than I'd ever seen her. The confidence, the arrogance, had leached out of them, replaced by an awkward, almost fearful deference. "Alara, darling," Mom began, her voice strained, attempting a warmth that sounded utterly false in these new surroundings. "This is quite the office." "It's functional," I replied, my tone neutral. I remained seated behind my large, uncluttered desk, a deliberate barrier. I didn't rise. I didn't offer them refreshments. This was not a social call. Tears welled in Mom's eyes, the practiced, manipulative tears I knew so well, but this time, there was a genuine tremor of desperation beneath them. "Alara, we've made mistakes. terrible mistakes. She wrung her hands. We didn't understand. We were misguided. Everything we did, it was out of love. You must believe that. Misguided love, perhaps, but love nonetheless. Clara nodded vigorously, her own eyes glistening. We wanted what was best, or what we thought was best. She took a hesitant step forward. We're so sorry, Alara, for everything. Their apologies hung in the air, a tapestry woven with threads of desperation and dawning realization. They had seen the power, the status, the wealth that was now mine. They had finally understood that the tables hadn't just turned. They had been flipped, shattered, and replaced with an entirely new game board, one where they held no pieces of value. We want to start fresh, Alara, Mom continued, her voice thick with emotion. As a real family. We can put the past behind us. We can support you. We can be the family you always deserved. The unspoken addendum, the real motivation was clear. They wanted in. They wanted a piece of this new, glittering life. Their support would come at a price. The price of association, of access, of financial benefit. Just then, the door opened again and Amelia ushered in another unexpected visitor. Victoria, our family friend, the gossip columnist in all but name. She looked flustered, her usual composure ruffled. She'd clearly seen Mom and Clara in the waiting area and, smelling a story, had managed to talk her way in. Alara, darling, Victoria gushed, her eyes wide, already assessing the room for details for her next social media expose. I just heard you were back in town and I simply had to… My goodness, Beatrice, Clara, what a surprise to see you here too. Her gaze flickered between us, sensing the tension, the unspoken drama. She was hoping for an exclusive, a soundbite, a way to leverage our fractured family dynamic for her own gain. I let the silence stretch, observing them all. My mother, desperate for a lifeline. My sister, stripped of her usual weapons. Victoria, hungry for scraps from my new table. They had all, in their own ways, contributed to the pain of my past. They had all underestimated me. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm, devoid of anger or triumph. Just a simple statement of fact. No, I said, looking directly at Mom, then at Clara. That won't be possible. The single word delivered without inflection was like a physical blow. Mom flinched. Clara's face crumpled. Victoria's eyes widened further, her journalistic instincts practically vibrating. I rose slowly from my chair, a clear dismissal. I have a great deal of work to do. Amelia will show you out. Mom started to protest, her voice rising in panic. But Alara, please, we're your family. Family, I repeated, the word tasting like ash. You had your chance to be my family. You made your choices. I turned to my desk, picking up a file, my attention already shifting to the matters of state that now consumed my days. The past is indeed behind us, and it will stay there. Amelia, ever efficient, gently but firmly began to guide them towards the door. Mom's pleas faded as they were escorted out. Clara shot me one last look, a look of utter desolation before she, too, disappeared. Victoria, after a moment of stunned silence, scurried out after them, no doubt already composing the headline in her mind. I stood by the vast window, looking out over the sprawling city. There was no elation, no surge of vindictive pleasure. Just a quiet, profound sense of closure. The cycle was broken. Their power over me was gone, not because I had crushed them, but because I had outgrown them. They were figures from a previous chapter, a chapter I had now firmly and irrevocably closed. The refusal was not an act of revenge, but an act of self-preservation. An affirmation of the new life I had built, a life where their brand of toxic love and manipulative games had no place. 1 year later, the grand ballroom of the royal palace glittered, chandeliers dripping diamonds of light, the air alive with the murmur of distinguished guests and the strains of a waltz. I stood on the balcony overlooking the scene, not as a nervous debutante, but as the hostess of the Royal Charity Gala, an event I had conceived and organized, raising an unprecedented sum for children's education initiatives across the Commonwealth. A soft breeze, carrying the scent of roses from the gardens below, the same gardens where James's downfall had been so quietly orchestrated, stirred my gown. There was a quiet satisfaction in the moment, a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with vanquishing old enemies. Peace. That was the emotion that settled over me, warm and encompassing. Not vengeance, not triumph, but a deep, unshakable peace. News of my former family reached me occasionally, through whispers in the periphery of my new life. Mom and Clara were living modestly in a small countryside cottage, the remnants of their social standing long since evaporated. Their attempts to leverage my name after my refusal had been met with polite but firm rebuffs from the palace and its associated circles. They were, effectively, irrelevant. I felt no bitterness towards them, only a distant, detached pity. They were trapped in their own small world of faded ambitions and regret, while mine continued to expand. "A remarkable evening, Lady Alara." A familiar voice spoke beside me. I turned to see Princess Annalise, her eyes twinkling with warmth and pride. She looked frail, her age more apparent now, but her spirit remained indomitable. She was my mentor, my confidant, the unlikely fairy godmother who had seen the princess locked within the pauper. "Your Highness," I smiled, "thank you for coming. It means a great deal." "Nonsense, child. The pleasure is all mine. You've done extraordinary work." She gestured towards the bustling ballroom. "Look at them. You've brought together people who wouldn't normally share the same air, all for a common good. That is true leadership." She paused, her gaze thoughtful. "You've grown so much, Alara, beyond even my expectations, which, as you know, were always considerable." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the dancers. "The foreign minister was speaking to me earlier," she said, her tone casual but with an underlying significance. "He mentioned the upcoming diplomatic posting to Geneva, head of the new International Trade Commission, a challenging role. He seems to think you are the only viable candidate." I nodded slowly. It was an opportunity I had been working towards, a chance to make a real difference on a global scale. "It's a significant responsibility. One you are more than capable of handling," she affirmed. "You have a rare combination of intellect, resilience, and integrity, Alara. The world needs more of that." She patted my arm. "Go, make your mark. Don't let anything or anyone hold you back." Later that week, my apartment was filled with the organized chaos of packing. Suitcases lay open, filled with carefully chosen attire, solidary for a new life in a new country. My new role was demanding, exciting, a world away from the petty dramas of my past. As I sorted through a box of old belongings, my fingers brushed against a small, framed photograph. It was of Mom, Clara, and me, taken years ago, before the bitterness had truly set in. For a moment, I saw the ghosts of what might have been, the family I had once yearned for. There was no anger, no lingering resentment, just a faint, wistful acknowledgement of a path not taken, a bond that had frayed beyond repair. I paused, then, instead of placing it in one of an empty suitcase destined for Geneva, I opened a drawer in my bedside table, a drawer filled with miscellaneous items I rarely looked at. I slid the photograph inside, nestled amongst old letters and forgotten trinkets. Not discarded, not destroyed, but put away. A conscious decision to move on, not by erasing the past, but by choosing not to carry its weight into my future. Closing the drawer, I turned back to my packing, a sense of lightness, of freedom settling over me. The future was an open horizon, vast and filled with promise, and I was ready to meet it, unburdened and whole.